So there's a lot of recipes out there for sourdough breads, which I have many of, and whole grain breads. This is neither. This is yeasted, this is good old white flour, and this is a sandwich bread that you can serve as sandwich bread for days. A friend of ours shared this recipe with us, and well, first she just brought us a loaf of bread one day, and my kids were like, "Mom, this bread has no crust. How does she manage that?" So yes, it does have a crust, it's just not a very thick one. And I thought it'd be fun to show you how to make our favorite sandwich bread. So we start by warming up milk and butter. This is actually buttermilk. You could use milk, you could use watered down yogurt, you could just use water. The dirty stove is not a prerequisite. You could use a clean stove too. I'm making a double batch here, which will make me 4 loaves. Just keep that in mind. So in the mixer, we have our flour, salt, yeast, and sugar, and make sure those dry ingredients are well combined. Your goal here is that the butter is just melting. There's still some chunks of butter here, but it's soft, and you can hold your finger in. If it's too warm to hold your finger in, it's too warm for the yeast to live. So this is as hot as it can get, any hotter, and my finger's not going to be happy in there, and the yeast will not be happy either. You'll kill it. Wet gets added to dry, and it beats for a couple minutes, and then we add more flour and let it knead. So I added 3 more cups of flour here, okay, but I'm doing a double batch, so 1.5 more cups if you're following a single batch recipe. And you can see how the dough still sticks to the side. If your bread dough still sticks to the side, it's not there yet. You need to add more flour. So since it's not super sticky, it's just still a bit, I'm gonna add half a cup more for my double batch. So it's no longer sticking to the sides. It's all clear there. And the dough itself still feels a tiny bit sticky. So I'm actually gonna add just another 1/4 cup of flour. You want the dough to be as soft as a baby's bottom and not sticky. So my dough has been kneading in here for a few minutes. It is now, like, it's a bit tacky, but it doesn't stick to my fingers, and it's not sticking to the bowl. It's well kneaded. If you are using a Bosch mixer to make this, this is what I have here. I'll link my review of it. You can make a triple batch of this dough in the Bosch comfortably. If you do a ×4 batch, so 8 loaves worth, it will mix it up well, but then you're gonna have to dump it out to knead it. It's just a bit too much. We did that the other day and it was just kind of pushing it. How are you gonna know if your bread is kneaded enough? Because you could be mixing this by hand or in a different mixer. There's no set time frame. There's so many factors. I'm gonna show you something called the window pane test. You take off about a golf ball size amount of dough, roll it into a ball, and then you're going to stretch it out. Can you stretch it without it breaking? If it starts busting holes like that or whatever, it's not ready. If you can gently stretch it and you can see light through it, there's gonna be tiny holes that will rip sometimes, but if you can stretch it and see light through it, then you're good. So that basically, can your ball of dough become a window pane? That's where the window pane test comes from. I think this needs another minute of kneading, so I'm gonna let this thing do its thing for another minute, and then all I'll do is I'll take out the dough hook and I'll put the lid on and let it rise in there. If you're doing it in a different mixer, you can just cover your bowl. You don't need to grease the bowl. All those things where people say, you know, you grease the bowl and this and that. Don't worry about it. Just cover your bowl, leave it be till it's doubled. So once your bread dough is nice and risen, looks a bit like a crack there. We're gonna dump it out onto the counter lightly floured, and shape our loaves. So this was not greased at all, but if your bread dough is the right consistency, honestly, very little is gonna stick, and what does stick, just rub your hands and it will come out. I find this Bosch mixer bowl, it's so easy to clean. I know I'm all crunching down here. This bowl, like, I barely even have to wash it. I didn't realize this would be a perk of a Bosch mixer, but guys, this thing's so easy to wash. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. So, next step is to divide this dough into 4 loaves. You could divide it into buns. If you make like golf ball sized dough balls, that will be dinner buns. If you make like double that size and flatten them a bit, then you'll get good sandwich or hamburger buns. Make sure if you're making them for sandwich or hamburger buns, you flatten the dough ball out a bit into a disc so that it doesn't end up just like a super tall bun. Buns bake for less time. I'll cover that later. Maybe I'll make a few buns just to show you an example. So I divided it into 4 because I made a double batch. So I'm gonna make 1 loaf worth into buns just to show you what it would look like if you made a single batch and you made 1 loaf of bread and 1 buns. This is helpful if you want to make it like you want some dinner buns for dinner, but then you also want a loaf of bread for sandwiches and toast. Yesterday I made a batch of this and I made half of it into kind of like cinnamon buns and half of it into dinner buns. So it's a really versatile dough that I just keep finding more ways to use it. To shape your bread dough, you're going to press it out into about the size of 2 of your hands and then roll it up, making sure that it's tight so that this is tight here. Fold these over, and there you go. Here's your log of bread dough. So also look like this side is a lot rougher, this side's a lot smoother. So have this side as your side down so that that becomes the top of your bread versus that being the top of your bread, because this being the top of your bread looks a lot more lumpy. So pinch this in here if necessary. The other thing you can do is kind of pull it like this. You'll see me do that in sourdough bread shaping. Again, check the sides. Actually, this side's a nicer side, so. You could actually make one of these a lot longer and make French bread too. Basically, the uses are endless. The reason I do parchment is this means I don't have to grease or flour or wash the pans. Bake them in parchment, dump them out, my bread doesn't stick, I don't have to wash the pans. Saves me so much time. There's nothing worse than making yourself a beautiful loaf of bread and then going to try to take it out of the pan and it sticks. Like I just put hours of work into this bread and then it has the nerve to stick. Use yourself some parchment, guys. It'd be a lifesaver. We're gonna make this, we don't flatten it quite as small. You want it a little thicker. I'm gonna make sandwich buns. So this is probably only gonna make about 9 buns. I'd say. So I did 1 loaf into 9. And all you're doing here is you're folding under to create a nice tight top. You create a nice tight top and your bottom is tucked together. And then you're gonna flatten it out into a disc that's about the size of the palm of my hand, a bit smaller, and put it on your pan. This shaping takes a bit longer, but I really love how beautiful the buns look. My bread rising trick is to not cover it in a tea towel or saran wrap, but to cover it in a big plastic bag. And I reuse this bag over and over and over again. This creates a nice kind of proofing chamber. The second rise on your bread is called the proof. The first rise is called your bulk or your bulk ferment. The second one is called your proof. And this just makes a really nice proofing chamber. It's moist, your bread doesn't dry out. It doesn't ever, like the wet tea towel doesn't like hold it down. It's just, I'm pretty sure you could use like a turkey roaster bag for this. I don't even remember where I got these bags from, but I love them. So the bread is nice and risen. It is doubled, which is what we wanted. So an easy way to tell. So we knew the bread took up the full pan, so it was 3 fingers. So then there's 3 fingers, and we know that it's doubled. The trick, one of the tricks to fluffy bread, no matter the recipe, is making sure that it is really fully doubled. Sourdough bread doesn't need to fully double. Yeasted bread needs to fully double if you want good fluffy bread. The buns are now out of the oven. They were only about 15 minutes. Mostly with buns, you can just look at the tops and know that they're done. Tops are lightly browned, and we know they're done. You tap the bottom, it sounds kind of hollow. The other way you can do it, which is what I always do with bread, is you can take its internal temperature. And this may seem overkill, but if you're struggling with getting bread to be the correct doneness, this is a foolproof way. You want about 190, between 180 and 200, and we're right there. So these buns are perfect, and the bread has 10 more minutes. So the bread timer went off. Oh, this one's got a funny bubble on top. But how I'm gonna test is the same way we did the buns. Just stick the instant read thermometer in. Oh, it's in Celsius. We need that in Fahrenheit. Let's see here. It's reading 170. That's a little low. I'm gonna give it just 2 more minutes, and then I'm sure it will be good. At that point, I won't take its temperature again in 2 minutes. I just know that roughly 2 more minutes, it'll just boost it up that last little bit and it'll be perfect. Now I've got 2 tricks up my sleeve to make this bread, the crust, so soft. Number 1 is that they're gonna stay in the pans for 10 minutes. This softens the sides. As for the tops, we got some homemade butter, yo. So, oh, it's really soft. Okay, normally it's firm enough that I can take the whole block and rub it on top. But I literally just go like this. Just smear it on, fresh out of the oven. It's a little hot, but we can do it. All in the name of good bread. That bump on there is funny. I haven't had that before. I'm sure you could melt it and do it with a pastry brush if you were really against using your fingers, but I'm not, and it's one less dirty dish. Whoa. So there we go. Now we're gonna let them rest in here for 10 minutes, and then I'll take them out to let them cool. When you take your bread out of the oven, you're going to be so tempted to cut into it right away, but please don't. It's still finishing baking as it cools. The structure of the crumb is still setting up. So if you're going to eat the whole loaf in one sitting, as in you just want a fresh loaf to go with your lunch or your dinner, go ahead, cut into a warm loaf. But if you're going to just cut a couple slices to eat right now, please let it cool at least an hour, ideally to room temperature, and you will be rewarded with better bread.